Προσφώνηση από τον Αντιπρίτανη Ακαδημαϊκών Υποθέσεων και Φοιτητικής Μέριμνας του Εθνικού και Καποδιστριακού Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών, καθηγητή Δημήτριο Καραδήμα.
Αξιότιμη κύριε Κοσμήτορ, αξιότιμη κυρία Πρόεδρε του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών, αγαπητοί συνάδελφοι, κυρίες και κύριοι, με ιδιαίτερη τιμή και τηρώντας την παράδοση του Ιδρύματός μας να αποδίδουμε τιμές σε προσωπικότητες που έχουν προσφέρει πολλαπλώς στην επιστήμη, έχουμε σήμερα την ιδιαίτερη χαρά, σε αυτή εδώ τη μεγάλη αίθουσα τελετών του Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών, να αποδίδουμε την ύψιστη τιμή της ανακήρυξης σε επίτιμο διδάκτορα του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών στον διακεκριμένο Αμερικανό καθηγητή Feld από το Πανεπιστήμιο Νιου Μέξικο των Ηνωμένων Πολιτειών. Η απονομή του τίτλου αποτελεί φόρο τιμής για την εξαιρετική συμβολή του καθηγητή Feld στα επιστημονικά πεδία της ανθρωπολογίας του ήχου, της μουσικολογίας και της γλωσσολογίας και ειδικότερα της ακουστιμολογίας, της σύζευξης της ακουστικής με την επιστημολογία, καθώς επίσης και των τεχνών του ήχου και της εικόνας. Το Τμήμα Μουσικών Σπουδών του Εθνικού και Καποδιστριακού Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών αποφάσισε ομόφωνα να εισηγηθεί στη Σύγκλιτο την ανακήρυξη του καθηγητή Feld σε επίτιμο διδάκτορα. Η εισήγηση έγινε δεκτή και η ανακήρυξη πραγματοποιείται σήμερα. Ο καθηγητής Feld είναι εθνομουσικολόγος, ανθρωπολόγος και γλωσσολόγος, ο οποίος ερεύνησε για πολλά χρόνια τη μουσική, τον πολιτισμό και τη γλώσσα, τον καλούλι της Παππούα Νέα Γουινέα. Το 1991 έλαβε βραβείο και υποτροφία για το επιστημονικό του έργο από το Διεθνούς Φήμης Ίδρυμα MacArthur των Ηνωμένων Πολιτειών της Αμερικής. Δίδαξε σε πολλά πανεπιστήμια, στις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες και σε άλλες χώρες. Το 2002 ίδρυσε την εταιρεία VoxLox, ήχος για τα ανθρώπινα δικαιώματα και την ακουστική οικολογία, με την οποία παρήγαγε και έκανε ευρύτερα γνωστό το πολυσχηδές έργο του μέσα από ηχητικές και οπτικές εφαρμογές πολυμέσων. Το τελευταίο του βιβλίο, Jazz Cosmopolitanism in Accra, 2012, αποτελεί προϊόν πενταετούς επιτόπιας έρευνας και συνεργασίας με Αφρικανούς μουσικούς και ερευνητές στην Άκρα της Γκάνα. Ο καθηγητής Feld είναι επίσης ενεργός μουσικός και έχει συμβάλει με τη δυναμική του παρουσία πολλαπλά στη λειτουργία της μουσικής σκηνής στο Νέο Μεξικό από τη δεκαετία του 1970 έως σήμερα. Η σχέση του με την Ελλάδα είναι στενή και μακρά. Η πρώτη του επιστημονική δουλειά ακρόασης και ηχογράφησης στην Ελλάδα χρονολογείται από το 2000 και στις προσεγγίσεις του αφηγείται με λέξεις, με εικόνες και με ήχους μερικές από τις πιο δυνατές εμπειρίες ακρόασης στην Ελλάδα. Το ελληνικό του έργο διαιρείται σε 4 διακριτές ενότητες. Η πρώτη αφορά τους ηχητικούς κόσμους των Ελλήνων Ρωμά οργανοπαικτών στην Ηράκλεια, Τζουμαγιά, στη Βόρεια Ελλάδα, κοντά στα βουλγαρικά σύνορα. Η δεύτερη παρουσιάζει τον ηχητικό κόσμο της καθημερινής ζωής του χωριού και τα χειμερινά φεστιβάλ βόρεια και ανατολικά της Θεσσαλονίκης. Η τρίτη ενότητα αφορά τους κουδουνάτους και το καρναβάλι της Σκύρου και η τέταρτη αναδεικνύει την ηχητική ιστορία των τζιτζικιών που φτάνουν από την αρχαιότητα του Πλάτωνα και την άκρη της αρχαίας πόλης της Αθήνας μέχρι τη σύγχρονη μουσική του Ξενάκη, τη θεωρία του χάους και την κλιματική αλλαγή. Ο καθηγητής Feld συσχετίζει αυτές τις εμπειρίες με κρίσιμα ζητήματα της πολιτισμικής ανθρωπολογίας, της παγκοσμιοποίησης της μουσικής, του κοσμοπολιτισμού, του ήχου και της φωνής στα τελετουργικά δρόμενα και της ιστορίας της σχέσης των βιολογικών ειδών ανάμεσα στη φύση και τον πολιτισμό. Οι σχέσεις του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών του Ε.Κ.Π.Α και ειδικότερα του τομέα εθνομουσικολογίας και πολιτισμικής ανθρωπολογίας με τον καθηγητή Feld, αλλά και το ευρύτατο διεθνές δίκτυο των επιστημονικών και καλλιτεχνικών του συνεργασιών, είναι πολύ στενές και έχουν επηρεαστεί βαθιά από την ποιότητα και το εύρος του έργου του τιμόμενου, το οποίο διδάσκεται διεξοδικά στο τμήμα και χρησιμοποιείται ως βασική βιβλιογραφία σε όλες τις βαθμίδες της σχετικής με το εν λόγω γνωστικό αντικείμενο πανεπιστημιακής εκπαίδευσης σε προπτυχιακό, μεταπτυχιακό και διδακτορικό επίπεδο. Για την εν γέννη προσφορά του, ο καθηγητής Feld έχει τιμηθεί πολλαπλά από τη χώρα του, αλλά και από ξένα πανεπιστήμια σε ολόκληρο τον πλανήτη. Οι θεωρητικές και μεθοδολογικές του προσεγγίσεις όσον αφορά στον ήχο ως πολιτισμικό φαινόμενο αποτελούν εδώ και πολλά χρόνια υπόδειγμα για τα προγράμματα σπουδών της μουσικής και του ήχου παγκοσμίως. Ο ίδιος, αλλά και σε συνεργασία με άξιους επιστήμονες και καλλιτέχνες του ήχου και της εικόνας, ανέδειξε πλήθος μαθητών, μεταξύ των οποίων και πολλοί σε ξένες χώρες, που συνεχίζουν το έργο του, εμπλουτίζοντάς το με νέες ιδέες και πρακτικές. Κυρίες και κύριοι, με μεγάλη και εξαιρετική τιμή και χαρά υποδεχόμαστε τον καθηγητή Στίβεν Feld και τον καλωσορίζουμε στο Πανεπιστήμιό μας. Τον ευχαριστούμε για την αστήρευτη προσφορά του στην επιστήμη και την τέχνη, τις ηχητικές και οπτικές καλλιτεχνικές εμπνεύσεις του, με σκοπό τη διεύρυνση της αντίληψης του κοινού σχετικά με τον πολιτισμό, τη γλώσσα και τη μουσική σε παγκόσμια και διαχρονική προοπτική. Τον συγχαίρω εκ μέρους της ακαδημαϊκής κοινότητας και του εύχομαι να συνεχίσει με την ίδια επιτυχία το σημαντικό του έργο. Dear Professor Feld, I would like to congratulate you on behalf of the academic community of the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens, and I wish you great success in your very important work in years to come. Thank you very much.
Παρουσίαση του έργου και της προσωπικότητας του τιμωμένου από τον καθηγητή του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών της Φιλοσοφικής Σχολής του Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών, Παύλο Κάβουρα.
Μετά τον κατατοπιστικό εισαγωγικό λόγο του αξιότιμου αντιπρίτανη, θα γυρίσω στην αγγλική γλώσσα για να τιμήσουμε και τον προσκεκλημένο μας, έτσι ώστε να μπορεί να παρακολουθήσει κάποιες σκέψεις που πρέπει να του απευθύνουμε με αφορμή αυτό το εξαιρετικό γεγονός και για εκείνον και για μας. So, Excellencies and esteemed guests, colleagues and students, dear friends, it is a great honor and privilege to present you Professor Feld, who is going to be awarded tonight the highest degree of our university, the honorary doctoral degree of the Music Studies Department. Stephen Feld is Distinguished Professor Emeritus of Anthropology, University of New Mexico, a man of many honors and international recognition for his pioneering work, primarily, but not exclusively, in the field of anthropology of sound. Multimedia ethnography, sensory ethnography, participatory ethnography, sound, photography, dialogic editing, These are some of the most salient words, reflecting, to some extent, again, the essence of Professor Feld's work. An anthropologist, linguist, as well as practicing musician, Feld became widely known for his explorations in contemporary sonic, sensory, and visual ethnography, including dialogic editing and collaborative projects between anthropology and art. One of his main contributions to the field is how multimedia ethnography has enabled listening to multiple sounds and voices through field sound recording and dialogic photographic imaging, writing, and editing. It is difficult to capture and render in few words the scope, goals, and objectives of the work of our honored guest. I shall restrict myself to 3 caveats about him, his work, and personality. 1. He comes from a strong background in both musical performance and visual arts, especially photography and film. He has tried from his earliest publications in 1980s to present equally his anthropology research in collaborative text, audio, radio, LP, cassette, CD, installation, and image, photography, film, exhibit, multimedia books. Caveat number 2. Since the mid-1970s, he had the opportunity twice to do more than 5 years field research in 2 very different places. Bosavi, a remote tropical rainforest community in one of the most isolated places in Papua New Guinea, and Accra, a cosmopolitan megacity in Ghana, West Africa. To stimulate the questions and issues that connect the two, he has, since 2000, made multiple recording collaboration visits to Europe, Greece, Italy, France, Denmark, Norway, Finland, and to Japan. Caveat number 3. In addition to lecturing in many countries, he has had opportunities to teach in the US, France, Italy, Norway, Australia, and Ghana in academic programs in anthropology, music, communications, film, cultural studies, and art practice. His research has always been strongly based in collaboration, and he has also tried to engage and learn from scholars and students around the world as much as possible. But why and how is Professor Feld important to the Music Studies Department of NKUA and to Greek anthropology and ethnomusicology in general? We at the NKUA are the only university department in Greece, the Music Studies Department, to have a separate sector of ethnomusicology and cultural anthropology and a laboratory bearing the same name. Combining cultural anthropology and ethnomusicology based on an inventive, systematic, and pioneering approach to sound and image, Professor Feld stands out as an iconic figure in the field, a person who who has realized in his own work a transdisciplinary dialogue between perception and expression, sensory experience and communicative competence across and within musical borders round the world. Professor Feld embodies and manifests the main principles and primary orientations of the Department of Music Studies of NKUA and the ethnomusicology and cultural anthropology sector in particular. Therefore, it is quite logical to wish to honor him today by awarding him the honorary degree of Doctor of Philosophy of our department. Let me now elaborate a bit more on Professor Feld's academic uniqueness and eventually his significance for our department and for the anthropology of sound in general. Professor Feld has paved the way towards transcending the quote-unquote ethno element in ethnomusicology, which has dominated the field since its inception, with positivist classifications of and speculative theories about the musics of the other, the non-Western other. Through his two seminal works on the Kaluli of Papua New Guinea and on jazz cosmopolitanism in Accra of Ghana, Feld has demonstrated convincingly that the arbitrary intellectual bifurcation between us and them is an illusion when it comes to the actually lived experiences of the so-called other. Whether cohabiting in the same physical environment as in the case of Kaluli people and the birds of the Bosavi rainforest, or dealing with the Western hybrid tradition of a popular music genre like jazz, from the perspective of the Ghanaian musicians, the other of the Western classificatory habitus evaporates as a useless and eventually misleading analytical category. Feld's anthropology of sound blends creatively music, globalization, cosmopolitanism, sound, and voice in ritual, and interspecies history. I would say that his multi-level anthropology project aims at realizing a transdisciplinary approach which purports to cross the borders of subjective conceptualization induced and maintained by the epistemological divide between the natural sciences and the humanities paradigms. He achieved this formidable transcendence by choosing to avoid the pitfall of phenomenological structuralism, as well as, quote-unquote, ethnic, ethnocentric, and neo-colonialist hermeneutics. Professor Feld is closely connected to Greece through his more recent research projects. He will later speak about his experience in Greece. The title of his talk is Listening to Histories of Listening in Greece. And I here play with the noun histories, his-stories. Right from the outset, I call your attention on the reflexive dimension of the title, Listening to Listening, mediated by storytelling. What a wonderful way to engage us all with the other in a perpetual becoming of I, they, I, ad infinitum as a trans-subjective experience, an equanimous expression of realities, Listening to listening is a juxtaposition of communicative competencies and at the same time a token of respect for the othering process of consciousness. I wish to close my introduction to Professor Feld's contribution to the field of anthropology by making a further reflection on what has been already mentioned about him. Allow me to be a bit personal about what I see as significant and path-breaking endowment in his work. This is integrity and clear vision, two prerequisites for a transformative perception and self-awareness of humanity. It is true that Professor Feld has integrated body and mind in a coherent whole in his works and established the idea that experience, expression, and communication is a totality that is informed by and manifested as habitual consciousness. His focus on perception as a means of making sense of the sensory world, of other people and other species, and of reflexivity as a multifaceted faculty of the intellect, stand out as unique achievements. Yet, what I find to be especially promising about his work is his conscious return to the sensorial interface between the ego, however defined and addressed, and his or her worldly experience. In Feld's approach, I see sincerity and humility towards knowing, engineered by a trickster-like archetypal motivation for discovery of the other. Through such conscious trickstering, he employs the orderless and unconscious modality of human intelligence as one of his magical tools, enabling him to avoid the traps of intellectualism and its polarizations. Such physical, coupled with psychological interplay of intelligence is a deliberate choice on his behalf, which ultimately helps to liberate perception from any generalizing and imperialistic habitus of knowledge-making and knowledge management. Listening to his stories of listening is a conscious return to the sensorial beyond the intellectual boundary of abstract conceptualization and a path heading towards reintegrating individualized consciousness, which is the result of differentiated identification. Feld's work in the anthropology of sound, perceived in its totality, is revolutionary as it crosses the boundary of identification, intellect serving ideology, and abstract intellectual differentiation. His emphasis on direct perception that is cleared of intellectual reflexive biases, which is burdened by subjectivism and objectivism, has brought his acoustemology and multimedia works to the point of enabling the listener to listen anew to the other, the embodied and the imaginary other, overarching sensations, images, and associations of thought as products of intellectual intelligence. Such a conscious return to the trickster paves the way for listening to emerge as an intelligent feeling of the other, a fundamental experience of humanity through the awareness of the inner self. Thank you, Steve. Please join me for a welcome.
Αναγόρευση του τιμωμένου. Ανάγνωση των κειμένων του ψηφίσματος του Τμήματος, της Αναγόρευσης και του Διδακτορικού Διπλώματος από την Πρόεδρο του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών, καθηγήτρια Αναστασία Γεωργάκη.
Εθνικών και Καποδιστριακών Πανεπιστήμιων Αθηνών. Ψήφισμα του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών της των Φιλοσόφων Σχολής. Τύχη αγαθή. Πριτανεύοντος εν το Αθήνησιν Εθνικό και Καποδιστριακό Πανεπιστημίο Μελετίου Αθανασίου Δημοπούλου, κοσμητεύοντος εν τη των Φιλοσόφων Σχολή Αχιλλέως Χαλδεάκη και προεδρευούσης εν το Τμήματι Μουσικών Σπουδών Αναστασίας Γεωργάκη, έδοξον ομοφόνος το τμήματι Στίβεν Φέλντ, άνδρα έφτε πεφικότα και παιδείας έμπλεον, εκ κόσμου του νέου ορμηθέντα, ένθα την ανθρωπολογίαν, την γλωσσολογίαν και την μουσικολογίαν εμβριθώς εσπούδασε, την μουσικήν, την γλώσσαν και των πολιτισμών πολλών λαών, ιδία των εν Παπούα Νέα Γουινέα της Οκεανίας διαβιούντων, κατά λεπτόν εκμελετήσαντα ελληνικήν εθνικήν μουσικήν και πολλά και σπουδαία περί αυτών συγγράψαντα, προς δε τούτης και την ελληνικήν εθνικήν μουσικήν εν σκύρο και αλαχού ανεβρίσαντα και έβνουν τη Ελλάδη και της Έλλησιν αίδια τελούντα εν τετί αυτού και εν Ευρώπη πλήθη φοιτητών διδάξαντα και πολλών τιμών αξιοθέντα, έδοξε λέγω, επένεσε τε αυτόν και επίτιμον διδάκτορα του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών της των Φιλοσόφων Σχολής αναδείξε, το δε ψήφισμα τόδε μεμβράνη αναγράψε και την του Τμήματος Πρόεδρον δημοσία εν τη αιθούση τη μεγάλη αναγνούσαν και τα στιμάς ανυπούσαν επιδούνε αυτό ή αν ημέρα η αναγόρευσης γέννηται καθά νενόμιστε. Εγένετο Αθήνης ημινός Μαΐου 1η και 20η, έτους 1ου και 20ου και δυσχιλιοστού από Χριστούς γεννήσεως. Η Πρόεδρος του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών, Αναστασία Γεωργάκη. Αναγόρευσης. Επειδή περ το Τμήμα Μουσικών Σπουδών της των Φιλοσόφων Σχολής του Αθήνησιν Εθνικού και Καποδιστριακού Πανεπιστημίου Στίβεν Φέλντ, άξιον απέφυνε του επιτίμου διδακτορικού αξιώματος, η δε των Φιλοσόφων Σχολή του ταπεδέξατο και ο πρίτανης της σχολής γνώμη επινεύει, διατάφτα εγώ, Αναστασία Γεωργάκη, καθηγήτρια της Μουσικής Τεχνολογίας, νυν δε του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών της των Φιλοσόφων Σχολής Πρόεδρος, χρωμένη τη δυνάμει, ειν παρά το Πανεπιστημιακών Νόμων και του Τμήματος έχω λαβούσα, Στίβεν Φέλντ, επίτιμον διδάκτορα του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών της των Φιλοσόφων Σχολής του Αθήνησιν Εθνικού και Καποδιστριακού Πανεπιστημίου, δημοσία αναγορεύω και πάσας αυτό τας προνομίας, τα στο πανεπιστημιακό τούτο αξιώματι παρεπομένας απονέμω. Εγένετο Αθήνης ημινός Ιουνίου 3η και 20η, έτους Δευτέρου και 20ου διαχιλιοστού από Χριστούς γεννήσεως. Η Πρόεδρος του Τμήματος Μουσικών Σπουδών, Αναστασία Γεωργάκη. Ελληνική Δημοκρατία. Πριτανεύοντος εν το Αθήνησιν Εθνικό και Καποδιστριακό Πανεπιστημίο Μελετίου Αθανασίου Δημοπούλου, καθηγητού της Θεραπευτικής Ογκολογίας Αιματολογίας εν τη των Επιστημών της Υγείας Σχολή, κοσμητεύοντος εν τη των Φιλοσόφων Σχολή Αχιλλέως Χαλδεάκη, καθηγητού της Βυζαντινής Μουσικολογίας και Ψαλτικής Τέχνης και προεδρευούσης εν το Τμήματο Μουσικών Σπουδών Αναστασίας Γεωργάκη, καθηγήτριας της Μουσικής Τεχνολογίας, Στίβεν Φέλντ, από δόγματος ομοθήμου της των Φιλοσόφων Σχολής, εις τους επιτίμους διδάκτορες εγκρίνομεν μηνός Ιουνίου 3η και 20η, έτους Δευτέρου και 20ου και δυσχυλιοστού από Χριστούς γεννήσεως, ο Πρίτανης, ο Κοσμήτωρ, η Πρόεδρος.
Περιένθηση του τιμωμένου με την Τίβενο της σχολής από τον Κοσμήτωρα της Φιλοσοφικής Σχολής, καθηγητή Αρχιλέα Χαλδεάκη.
Ομιλία του τιμωμένου ομότιμου καθηγητή Στίβεν Φέλντ.
I am deeply moved, deeply honored, and deeply humbled by the generous gift that your university has just bestowed upon me. And I want to offer deepest thanks to the university and to my friends and colleagues, particularly Anastasia and Pavlos, for these very, very generous speeches to introduce me. The journey that brings me here to Athens today began 50 years ago. In 1972, as a new graduate student at Indiana University, I attended the seminar of Alan Merriam, whose 1964 book, The Anthropology of Music, was already canonical. To test if we had read it carefully, Merriam challenged each of us students to write a critique. My essay began with this sentence: "What about an anthropology of sound?" Why? Because my musical biography was dominated by playing jazz, recording film soundtracks, and composing musique concrète. And my anthropology biography was dominated by years as a student of Colin Turnbull, whose recordings from Rainforest Central Africa were absolutely captivating. For the next 20 years, into the early 1990s, I developed the anthropology of sound idea to expand musical anthropology in 4 directions: considerations of poetics and voice, considerations of species beyond the human, considerations of ecology and environment, and considerations of technology, mediation, and circulation. Since the early 1990s, I have tried to further explore these ideas through the concept of acoustomology, a new word joining acoustics to epistemology to ask how sound is a way of knowing. Acoustomology asks what is knowable and how it becomes known through sounding and listening. It asks how sounding and listening involve not just an individual, but always relations with others, variously human, non-human, living, non-living, organic, and mechanical. A principal stimulus to my thinking about these issues came from 25 years of fieldwork in the Bosavi rainforest in Papua New Guinea. It was there that I first imagined listening as a way of knowing, with and knowing through the audible. In his book, The Poetics of Space, the philosopher Gaston Bachelard coined the oxymoronic phrase, intimate immensity, to speak about the primal sense of dwelling in the physical home. Listening to and in the rainforest led me to reimagine his phrase as intimate acoustic immensity in order to ask questions like this. How is it possible that a 12-year-old Bosavi child with no visual clues can identify the 19 species of birds audible on that recording? And I apologize for the technical problem with the audio. How is it possible that on our planet there has evolved a society where the most knowledgeable ornithologists are also typically the most renowned composers? How does this intimate acoustic immensity entangle humans with non-humans to live in an inclusive plurality that we call the rainforest? To answer, Bosavi people taught me how birds, like the bird of paradise you see here, sound simultaneously as time clocks and as ancestral spirits. They taught me how ceremonial dancers become these spirits when they can be heard and seen as birds at forest waterfalls. They taught me how Bosavi songs are sung in a bird's voice. They taught me that songs, like birds, create flight and flow paths through rainforest waterways. They taught me that water moves through the land like voice moves through the body. Over 25 years, I recorded about 1,000 Bosavi songs, and their poetic texts contain some 7,000 names of places, of flora, of fauna, of topography. Bosavi people taught me how these forest song maps are also memory maps of families and friendships. They taught me that as knowledge productions, songs are an archive of ecological and aesthetic coevolution. how to record such a world. Here you see how I learned to hear the forest, to hear its acoustic and ecological niches, and then to record them at 3 levels of height and 2 of depth. Recording this way, as you see, creates 3 unequal overlapping triangles, which can be mixed to both scientifically and aesthetically render the fullness of acoustic space in the rainforest. Consider this picture of Ulahi sitting on a rock in a creek, a place where she has composed and sung many songs. I recorded her voice in stereo, then I recorded the forest from the bank behind her at heights of 5 and 10 feet. Then I sat on the same rock and recorded the water to the left, to the right, and behind. Then I recorded 3 frontal creek bank perspectives at 5 feet and ambient crickets at the same time of day. All of these tracks that you see, all of them were mixed to create an ecological sound image. And so I ask you, why record just a singer when it is possible to record the singer and everything she hears in the act of singing? Why record just a singer when it is possible not just to hear her voice, but to enter into her history of listening? 25 years later, I composed a film that included this mix, visualizing it with split screen and drone imaging. It combines the 3 perspectives essential to Bosavi composers and their song poetry: the world as observed by birds, the world as sensed by the walking body, and the world of imagination.
Sayaka, wafia sana selika siligi, wiki dafe kanarabo, wiabe mo kanarabo, wiki dafe kanarabo, awanu nira siya makakani, wafia sana kurame sa sigaro, wafunya de kome sa sigaro, wafia sana kurame sa sigaro. Sayaka, wafia sana selika siligi, wiki dafe kanarabo, wiabe mo kanarabo, wiki dafe kanarabo, adeyo nunira siya makakani, piyo so kurame sa sigaro, kalene de kome sa sigaro, piyo so kurame sa sigaro. Sayaka, wafia sana selika siligi, wiki dafe kanarabo, wiabe mo kanarabo, wiki dafe kanarabo, awanu nira siya makakani, inate kurame sa sigaro, wafunya de kome sa sigaro, inate kurame sa sigaro, wafunya de kome sa sigaro. Pide sagu, ebora. Pide sagu, ebora. Nika vera lingara, pide bese vera lingara, kayo vera lingara. Nede kumisio ne ra bena, ebeli go ne ra bena, ebeli go ebe kusakwa bigi be miawo. Nika vera lingara, pide bese vera lingara. Kayo vera lingara, tu kumisio ne ra bena, sala sabe ra ne ra bena, banyak aku tak apa biji bebe miawo, nika vera lingara, tidak bisa vera lingara, kayo vera lingara, kukuno nera bebena, yagafo nera bebena. Aku lo kusaku api bebe miawo, kululide, salah sawe bulide, kululide, salah sawe bulide. Mo fiene bo, ike sawe fiene de, mo fiene bo, ike sawe fiene de.
These are some of the ways that I've tried to use film and audio to do an anthropology of sound in sound. In the year 1999, the politics of transnational mining and logging made it impossible for me to return to the rainforest. So Charlie Kyle, my oldest friend in music anthropology, invited me to experience the millennial transition here in Greece, where he, his wife, Angeliki Veloukail, and photographer Ε.Κ.Π.Α were completing a book about the Romani instrumentalists. My mission was to record what are locally known as taorgana, the virtuosic Romani Zurna and Dauli trios, as their sounds induced the pleasure, the kefi at parties, festivals, and taverna tables during the Christmas and New Year's weeks. But then, something special happened. Driving through the country one day, we stopped along the road to greet a shepherd. Immediately, I heard cascades of sheep and goat bells, the animals variously visible or invisible. And almost as immediately, I experienced the menacing hostility of the shepherd's herd dog as I got too close to the animals with my microphone. And in response, I heard the shepherd cursing the dog after its teeth had ripped through my jeans at the ankle. My ears exploded in this deep listening moment, and goosebumps came over my arms. In a sonic flash, I found myself asking, could it be that pastoral bells are like rainforest birds, telling time and space? Could it be that bells stand to 1,000 years of European history as birds stand to thousands more in the tropical rainforest? Could it be that animal bells sonify the boundaries of common and private land? And could it be that animal bells sonify histories of class, of wealth, of labor, and struggles over land ownership? And so, on a winter afternoon in a little village, my listening life changed profoundly. It was literally all Greek to me, a swirling confusion equally linguistic, sonic, historical, and geographic. I remember that moment as if it was yesterday, and I remain indebted to Shepherd Mitsos and the Guido Provida of Asiros for opening my ears to a totally new horizon of sound as a way of knowing. Traveling with the instrumentalists as they performed for local winter festivals, the carnivalesque of animal bells overtook my ears. The processions, the mayhem, and some of the loudest sounds I've ever experienced and recorded flowed through villages the same way birds and human voices flowed through the rainforest. The Madziris trio, featuring father and son Kostas and Elias Dimanos, playing Dauli, played as the crowd swelled into the plaza. Their last song, and my recording, was overtaken when bell dancers captured the drummer and then came to capture me. That this was forever to be my close noise encounter of the Greek carnival kind. But then, a few years later, anthropologist and bell expert Panos Chronopoulos suggested that E.K.P.A and I come to Skiros with him to experience the ultimate in thundering carnival bells. This is when I fully heard how carnival denaturalizes quiet and articulates struggle through belled revelry, and with this, the play of costume transformation for humans who more typically control animals by giving them voice in the form of a distinctive bell. The density of this experience led to an experimental and collaborative intermedia book. Ε.Κ.Π.Α contributed black and white and color photographs. Panos joined Skiros ethnographer Agapi Amanatidis to write the catalog essay, and I contributed a CD and DVD. As Panos and Agapi wrote in their essay, quote, "Resounding bells provide an eloquent metaphor for the time and space of carnival. Villagers and visitors take part not only by watching it unfold in front of their eyes, but by hearing it envelop them in its swelling ambience. This overwhelming listening experience, the primal sense of carnival, gives way, after Queen Monday, to a ritual silence." Following later conversations here in Athens about climate change and my recordings of the New Guinea rainforest songs that are sung with, to, and about cicadas, Panos suggested that I read the book Listening to the Cicadas by the University of California, Berkeley classicist John Ferrari. This work explores Plato's dialogue Phaedrus, which takes place in swelling midday heat under a platanus tree at Ilissos, then the outskirts of the ancient city. Cicadas pulse in the dramatic foreground of the opening discourse on Eros, heating up Socrates' takedown of the rather feeble speech by Lysias that excited the somewhat dense Phaedrus. As that conversation winds down, cicadas make a dramatic return, at which moment Socrates explains that they were in fact once human poets and singers before the birth of the Muses. But they devoted themselves entirely to music and wasted away by forgetting to eat or drink. To reward them for their devotion, the Muses turned them into cicadas. And on that note, Socrates reminds Phaedrus that they should not fall asleep to the heat's synesthetic drone, but rather engage in vigorous dialectic, so that the cicadas will hear and speak well of them to the Muses. On a hot summer day, Panos, media anthropology colleague Yorgos Samatas, and I went to Ilissos with recorders to listen to the cicadas. Panos and I later returned to film. Here, in a triplex screen stereo reduction from an imagined surround image and sound installation, we listen and look upward from under a platanus tree at Ilissos to listen to that history of ancient listening. The changing screens are synchronized to shifting temperatures and cicada rhythms in the hope of sensuously evoking something of what Socrates and Phaedrus might have heard and felt during their dialogue around 325 BC. here is the compositional matrix of that sonorous ecology. The full piece lasts about 15 minutes. As part of our imagined installation, we punctuate this surround of sound and image with backtalk, just as Socrates admonished Phaedrus to resist the droning cicada lull. From multiple small TV sets around the space, we hear and see destabilizing random clips of weather reports about scorching heat waves in Greece, compiled by Yorgos from Greek TV archives. The possibilities for composing these random sonic interactions is, for me, deeply inspired by the work of the extraordinary composer and theorist Yannis Xenakis, whose centennial I join you to celebrate at this moment. I had the brief experience to know him 50 years ago at Indiana University, just where I began the story of my Odyssey today. In his electroacoustic music class, Xenakis introduced us to his then newly translated book, Formalized Music. And as you see on the screen, he writes, "Sonic events are made out of thousands of isolated sounds. This multitude of sounds, seen as a totality, is a new sonic event. This mass event is articulated and forms a plastic mold of time, which itself allows aleatory and stochastic laws." What follows from that paragraph is this one, quote, "Everyone has observed the sonic phenomena of a political crowd of dozens or hundreds of thousands of people," he writes. Continuing, "The human river shouts a slogan in a uniform rhythm. Then another slogan springs from the head to the demonstration. It spreads toward the tail, replacing the first. A wave of transition thus passes from the head to the tail. The clamor fills the city, and the inhibiting force of voice and rhythm reaches a climax. It is an event of great power and beauty in its ferocity. Then the impact between the demonstrators occurs. The perfect rhythm of the last slogan breaks up in a huge cluster of chaotic shouts, which also spreads to the tail. Imagine, in addition, the reports of dozens of machine guns and the whistle of bullets, adding their punctuations to this total disorder. The crowd is then rapidly dispersed, and after this sonic and visual hell follows a detonating calm, full of despair, dust, and death. And then, switching back from dramatic to dryly analytic, he concludes the paragraph like this: "The statistical laws of these events, separated from their political and moral context, are the same as those of the cicadas or of the rain. They are the laws of the passage from complete order to total disorder in a continuous or explosive manner. They are stochastic laws." Of course, in 1972, some of these words were very resonant for many of us students who had demonstrated against the Vietnam War on American college campuses. But Xenakis' evocation of sonic and visual hell was considerably more visceral than anything we could possibly imagine. For the history of his student activism in political demonstrations was marked by the scars of a tank blast to the left side of his face and impacts both to his vision and audition. Was this the plastic mold of time that sonically connected cicadas to gunshots and crowd chaos? There are many moments in Xenakis' work where sounds swell dramatically, as he describes here. But as the eminent Xenakis scholar, who I'm so grateful is here today, Maki Solomos, pointed out to me, this passage about cicadas must be listened to through the 1968 composition Nuit, where 12 voices explode with mass bursts of Sumerian, Assyrian, and ancient Greek phonemes. This composition, additionally, is dedicated to political prisoners, a dedication also deeply explored in one of Professor Solomos' many essays about Xenakis. To conclude, my practice is research as composition, and it begins with listening and recording. Recording both amplifies listening and from it creates a new material, a new basis for composition, but also a new basis for further research. On my path, I've encountered many philosophers like Elizabeth Grosz and Maurice Merleau-Ponty, who have led me to reflect deeply on listening across species. And I've encountered many composers who, like John Cage, inspire me to always think about sound as an ecology. But with no doubt, after 25 years in the rainforests of Papua New Guinea, it was my first listening experience here in Greece that truly created a new horizon. And these 20-plus years of listening, recording, and composing with local friends and collaborators will remain as unforgettable as the honor bestowed upon me this day. Thank you.
Πέρας της εκδηλώσεως.